Dude, it's £6. It's why I don't play Monopoly with you.
Earlier this year, my wife's choir group West End Wednesdays put together a medley of songs from Rent, and so we watched the Broadway version on TV. I barely remembered anything from it, and I didn't enjoy it very much either. I couldn't remember a single character name, the story, and could only remember snippets of what happened. That being said, the trailer for the film looks interesting. There are some well-known names in the cast, and perhaps reviewing it will have it stick in my mind better, as I'll be studying it more. Conversely, I could also come away really disliking it, but that's the risk I'm willing to take. Here's my review of Rent. Christmas Eve, New York 1989, and struggling musician Roger and filmmaker Mark are freezing in the dark in their apartment. In the nearby tent city where the homeless live, their ex-roommate Benny, who's now married into a rich family, is trying to disrupt Mark's ex-girlfriend Maureen's protest over development of the site, which will move all the homeless on. He's also Mark and Roger's landlord and tells them to stop the protest or else leave. Meanwhile, Tom Collins, Mark and Roger's friend, is mugged outside and found by cross-dresser Angel, who tends his wounds. The two both have AIDS and go to a support group together, becoming a couple in the process. One of the neighbours, Mimi, a dancer at a local club, meets Roger, asking him to light her candle whilst the building's heat and electricity has been shut down by Benny. Roger, a recovering drug addict, pushes her away as she still uses, and he doesn't want to give her the HIV which he has due to his previous drug use. Maureen calls Mark for help with her sound system for the protest, and in doing so, Mark meets Joanne, the lawyer that Maureen left him for. When he talks about Maureen's idiosyncrasies, Joanne becomes more wary of Maureen's overly flirty ways. The protest is received well by the crowd until a full-blown riot breaks out with the police. Mark films the footage of the fighting and sells the footage to the news. This gives him a job opportunity at Buzzline, which he initially refuses until he finds a padlock on the front door of his apartment building. Thanks to Joanne, but not Maureen, much to her chagrin, Mark gets the job at Buzzline, is paid well, and can actually afford the rent on his apartment, despite Benny wanting to let him and Roger stay for free in exchange for good publicity. Mimi continues to pursue Roger, and when he finds out that she too has HIV, the two become a couple as well. Maureen and Joanne make a commitment to each other, and at a celebratory party thrown by Joanne's parents, the two argue and break up. Time passes, and Angel, who's been holding the group together, gets progressively more ill and eventually passes away. Mimi tries to kick her drug habit, but relapses, and shortly after Angel's funeral, she disappears. Roger, meanwhile, decides to sell his guitar, buys a car, and moves to Santa Fe, New Mexico, only to come back shortly afterwards. Mark quits his job at Buzzline after he finds no joy in it, and everyone looks for Mimi. They find her almost dead in the park and bring her back to the apartment. Roger admits that he has always loved Mimi and sings the song he's been trying to write for a year, but Mimi passes away. She then wakes up, sits up, and tells everyone how she saw Angel, who told her to go back. Mark plays his documentary he's been working on for a year to everyone in the apartment. Rent is an odd story to summarise. It doesn't follow one central character or story arc, but instead looks at the 8 main characters over the course of the year, almost using Mark as the documenter. It's unusual, but it works for the most part, and I suspect that this is the main reason I didn't remember the plot from watching the musical. This time though, it was easier to follow, but there are some real issues I have with the story which I want to go into. Let's start with everyone's favourite trope, resurrection. I wrote a whole video essay on why I don't think this works for the most part, and this example is right up there with the bad ones. I get that they're trying to have Angel put the group back together one last time, but the way that Mimi dies and then sits back up absolutely fine is really awkward. This was the case in the Broadway too, so it's not a knock against the film per se, more against the story. Either keep her dead or have her be near death. Either way works better. Her death made my wife cry when we watched this, but then that emotion invested into the character of the story is completely flip reversed. Whilst I'm talking about Mimi, Roger pushes her away for the majority of the first half of the film, and it's heavily implied it's because of his HIV and Mimi's drug usage. Firstly, Roger's friends seem to encourage the relationship despite Roger being a recovering drug addict, but the fact they don't get together sooner is based on them not talking to each other and Roger explaining why he won't get together with her. Now, I understand that this is the main point of the song I Should Tell You, but trope-wise this is called an idiot plot, a narrative where the conflict arises from characters not being told important information that would resolve the conflict. Perhaps I need to do a video on that. I want to talk about the characters briefly. I feel that would work better than an overall plot summary. I've touched on Mark briefly. His arc of making a documentary of the homeless around New York, getting a big break but hating it before finishing his film, is simple but effective, and really the only nitpick I have is Mimi's just come back to life. Maybe don't show your documentary right there and then. As somebody who makes his own videos and content, there's a time and a place to promote your own stuff. How I recently did a comedy ASMR sleep meditation, but you don't see me promoting that everywhere, although if you are here, you should go see it. Roger is a struggling musician who wants to write one last song before he dies from HIV. I've already spoken on the conflict on whether he wants to get together with Mimi due to her drug usage and his HIV, but the two characters contrast each other really well. Collins meets Angel really early on, and the two are inseparable until Angel's death. It's a sweet love story with a tragic ending. Angel being the glue that holds the group together is solidified when they die, but I feel that Mimi being sent back after death by Angel hammers the point home too much. So little is done with Benny. He's the most underdeveloped character, with much of his progression being told rather than shown. It feels like he's not really one of the main cast. Joanne is the long-suffering girlfriend of Maureen, but is mainly there to flesh out Maureen's character, someone who I really didn't like. Her self-centered behaviour really winds me up, and there aren't really many redeeming qualities of hers. Do you ever see that show Coupling? She reminds me of Jane.
You want us to split up?
Yes. Oh, yes, I do.
I don't accept.
What?
I don't accept it.
No, you can't not accept it. I'm breaking up with you.
Well, don't I get a say in it?
Of course you don't.
If I don't get a say in it, then I don't accept it. Anyway, then my sister just looked at me and she said, no.
Even her protest, which is meant to help the homeless, is turned into a look at me fest, with her face all over the posters and the TV screens in the background. Not to mention that as soon as Mark gets a job at BuzzFeed, Maureen is the first to try and make it all about her. Most of the actors in the film are from the Broadway show, making for an already great chemistry and performances all round. Only Tracy Toms as Joanne and Rosario Dawson as Mimi weren't in the Broadway show, with Tracy Toms later doing the role of Joanne on Broadway. I love Rosario Dawson in everything she's in, playing a level-headed, strong female character and in no way overly sexualized. This being a musical, the soundtrack is a huge focus. Now, this may be a hot take, but Rent has one of the most hit and miss soundtracks I've ever heard. There are some great songs such as Rent, Tango Maureen and Seasons of Love, but then some really grating bad ones such as You'll See, One Song Glory and La Vie Bohème. Look, I know it's one of the more popular songs, but it seems to go on forever and it annoys me more than anything else. I do like the choreography for a lot of the songs, but for me it's the camera work and direction that's top notch. Christopher Columbus directs, and some of the shots really heighten what's happening and make the set seem like the streets of New York rather than a stage show moved to the big screen. As such, this is the best example of a stage show becoming a movie I think I've ever seen. and I actually prefer the movie to the musical. The best example I can think of is the support group. The camera work circling around the group, and every so often one member fades as they pass with time, building up to Angels passing at the end of the song. Wonderful work that. I also love the fact that the film opens with Seasons of Love, with the focal characters, and Benny, lined up on a stage in spotlights. Have the most well-known song first before the story begins and recognise the stage show origins. This might be a weird criticism, but I think Rent is the wrong title for the show and the film. Now, an argument could be made to calling it Seasons of Love, but I think this play should be called No Day But Today. Rent is barely mentioned as a plot point, and the theme of No Day But Today is more prevalent throughout. Of course, changing the name does ruin the reference point I go to when I hear the name Rent.
Where is the rent? I must have the rent. Dollars, dimes, and nickels, I need them all right now.
I was surprised to learn that Rent didn't do that well at the box office, bringing in 31.7 million on a budget of 40 million. The reception was mixed too, and I can understand that more honestly. Despite my glowing praise on how everything is staged for the film, I don't think the story works in this medium. As a result, I can use Rent as an example of a good adaptation from stage to screen, but as a standalone film, I don't think I can. There's a lot here that doesn't hit the mark for me. With a soundtrack that I only sort of like, a solid cast, a story which doesn't have a solid structure, and some great direction, it is all over the place. I'd say it's worth a watch if you like musicals, but I don't think this will convince you if you're not. If you're planning on watching Rent, there's no day but today. Thank you for making it this far. If you like what you see, please feel free to give this video a like and share it around. Maybe leave a comment below about what you thought of this video. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel so you can get notified when I upload new videos. If you'd like to support me in other ways, you can buy merchandise at bradleyj.tmail.com, where you can buy t-shirts and tote bags. Or you can become a patron at www.patreon.com/BradleyJVoices for just £1 a month. Coming up next for the Film Review Open Challenge is Dunkirk. For now though, thank you very much for watching.